He blinked. Elena Rodriguez pressed her back against the mahogany door, her heart hammering against her ribs as she stared at the motionless figure in the bed. 3 years, 2 months, and 17 days of absolute stillness, and she'd just seen Marcus Hartwell's left eyelid flutter for exactly 2 seconds. "You're losing your mind," she whispered to herself, the same words she'd repeated every morning for the past month when she thought she'd caught glimpses of awareness that vanished the moment she looked directly. But this time was different. This time, she'd been watching his reflection in the antique mirror beside his bed, and she'd seen it clearly, deliberate, conscious movement. Her phone buzzed. Dr. Reeves' name flashed on the screen, and Elena's stomach dropped. She already knew what the call would bring. "Ms. Rodriguez?" The doctor's voice carried the weight of finality. "I'm calling to inform you that we'll be discontinuing Mr. Hartwell's monitoring services effective tomorrow. The family has made the decision to let nature take its course." Elena slumped against the door, her free hand gripping the brass handle. "They're giving up on him. I'm sorry, but after 3 years with no signs of consciousness, no response to stimuli, no brain activity indicating awareness, the family feels it's time to accept reality. They've arranged for hospice care to begin next week." Hospice care. Elena closed her eyes, knowing exactly what that meant. Marcus Hartwell III, the man who'd built an empire from nothing, who'd employed thousands, who'd once been Forbes' cover story, would be quietly sedated until his body finally surrendered. "The family wanted me to tell you that your services will no longer be needed after Friday. They appreciate your dedication." Dedication. As if caring for someone the world had written off was merely professional obligation. "Dr. Reeves," Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. "What if I told you I've observed signs of awareness?" A pause. Then, the condescending tone she'd grown to hate. "Ms. Rodriguez, I understand how difficult this must be. You've spent more time with Mr. Hartwell than anyone. Sometimes our minds create patterns where none exist, especially when we're emotionally invested. I'm not imagining things. The family has been quite clear. No more false hope. I'm sorry." The line went dead. Elena stared at her phone, then at the man who'd become the center of her existence for the past 3 years. Marcus lay exactly as he had every day since the morning she'd found him collapsed in his study. Eyes closed, breathing shallow but steady, his once powerful frame now gaunt beneath expensive sheets that his ungrateful family changed monthly out of obligation, not love. Welcome, friends, to a story that will challenge everything you think you know about loyalty, consciousness, and the power of human connection. What you're about to discover will stay with you long after the final words fade. Elena approached the bed slowly, her nurse's training warring with something deeper. An intuition that had guided her through 20 years of caring for the forgotten and abandoned. "I know you're in there," she whispered, settling into the chair beside his bed that she'd occupied for exactly 1,095 days. "I know you can hear me." She pulled out her phone and scrolled to the folder she'd been building for months. Photos, videos, detailed notes documenting every micro-expression, every slight change in breathing pattern, every moment when she could swear Marcus Hartwell was fighting to return to the world that had already buried him. But Elena carried a secret that would have shocked the doctors, devastated the family, and rewritten every newspaper article about Marcus Hartwell's mysterious condition. She wasn't just his caregiver. She was the daughter of Isabella Rodriguez, the woman Marcus had loved 30 years ago. The woman his family had paid to disappear. The woman who died giving birth to Elena, taking with her the truth about Marcus's firstborn child. Elena was Marcus Hartwell's daughter, and she was the only person left who believed he was worth saving. As she settled in for what might be her final night watching over him, Marcus's eyes suddenly opened, fixing directly on hers with unmistakable recognition. "Help me," he mouthed silently, his voice long gone but his eyes blazing with desperate intelligence. They did this to me." Elena's world tilted. For 3 years, she'd believed in his awareness while everyone else had given up. But she'd never imagined he'd been conscious this entire time, trapped in his own body, witnessing every conversation about ending his life, every family meeting where they discussed his assets, every moment when the world decided he was better off dead. "Who did this to you?" she whispered. Marcus's eyes moved almost imperceptibly toward the family photograph on his nightstand. The same family who'd just ordered his execution disguised as mercy. Elena followed his gaze and felt the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. The timing of his collapse, right before the will reading that would have revealed Elena's existence. The family's unusually quick acceptance of his condition. Dr. Reeves' immediate dismissal of any signs of improvement. Marcus Hartwell hadn't suffered a mysterious medical crisis. He'd been poisoned. And tomorrow, they were going to finish what they'd started. Elena's hands trembled as she reached for Marcus's fingers, the first physical contact she'd dared make in 3 years. His skin was warm, real, alive in ways that contradicted every medical report filed about his condition. "Can you move anything else?" she whispered. Marcus's response was barely perceptible, a slight pressure against her palm. 3 squeezes. Then 2. Then 1. It was the code she'd developed with patients in the ICU before coming to work for the Hartwell family. 3 meant yes, 2 meant no, 1 meant emergency. 1 squeeze. Emergency. Elena's nurse training kicked in even as her heart raced. She checked his pulse, his breathing, scanned for any signs of distress. But Marcus's eyes remained locked on hers, and she realized he wasn't signaling medical emergency. He was telling her that time was running out. "They're coming tomorrow with the hospice team," she said. "The family thinks you're gone." 2 squeezes. "No." His eyes moved toward the nightstand drawer. Elena hesitated. She'd cleaned every inch of this room for 3 years, but had never opened his personal drawers. She'd been hired help, invisible to a family that barely acknowledged her existence, except to criticize her work or discuss Marcus's care, as if he weren't present. But she wasn't just hired help. She was Isabella Rodriguez's daughter. Elena opened the drawer and gasped. Inside lay dozens of photographs. Pictures of her mother at 17, 18, 19 years old. Isabella's radiant smile, her dark eyes so similar to Elena's own, her hands often intertwined with those of a young Marcus Hartwell. They looked happy. They looked in love. Beneath the photographs was a letter in Marcus's handwriting, dated just days before his collapse. "My beloved Isabella is gone, but I found her. Our daughter. Elena has been caring for me without knowing who she is, and I've been too much of a coward to tell her. But I'm changing my will tomorrow. She deserves everything, the recognition, the inheritance, the love I failed to give her mother. The family will resist, but Elena is my blood. She's the only pure thing left in this corrupted legacy. Asterisk." Elena's legs gave out, and she collapsed into the chair. Marcus had known. He'd known she was his daughter, and he'd been planning to publicly acknowledge her the day he'd collapsed. "You knew," she breathed. "This whole time, you knew who I was." 3 squeezes against her palm. "Yes." The bedroom door creaked open, and Elena quickly closed the drawer, moving away from the bed as Catherine Hartwell, Marcus's eldest child, entered with her usual expression of barely contained disgust. "Still here, I see," Catherine said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. At 45, she possessed her father's calculating intelligence, but none of his warmth. "I thought Dr. Reeves explained that your services are no longer needed." "I finish my shift at midnight," Elena replied, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Same as always." Catherine moved closer to the bed, studying her father's face with the coldness of someone appraising livestock. 3 years of this. Do you have any idea what this has cost us? The medical bills, the around-the-clock care, maintaining this mausoleum of a house for a man who's essentially a vegetable. Elena's hands clenched into fists, but she said nothing. She'd learned long ago that defending Marcus only made Catherine more vicious. "At least it's almost over," Catherine continued, adjusting Marcus's blanket with mechanical precision. "The hospice nurse starts Monday. Much more efficient than this prolonged suffering." "He's not suffering," Elena said before she could stop herself. Catherine laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "How would you know? You're a maid who plays nurse. You have no medical training, no real education. You dust furniture and empty bedpans, and somehow think that qualifies you to have opinions about my father's condition." The words hit Elena like physical blows, each one designed to remind her of her place in the Hartwell hierarchy. But Catherine had no idea she was mocking Marcus's own daughter, insulting the granddaughter of the woman Marcus had loved more than his wife. "I've been caring for him every day for 3 years, Elena said quietly. "I've seen things the doctors missed." "Like what? Miracle recoveries? Divine interventions?" Catherine's voice dripped with condescension. "You people always think there's some magical cure, some sign that everything will be fine. It's poverty thinking. You can't accept that sometimes things just end. You people." Elena had heard that phrase her entire life, the casual dismissal of anyone who didn't inhabit Catherine's world of inherited wealth and assumed superiority. But Elena was people too. She was Hartwell people, whether Catherine knew it or not. The family is meeting tomorrow morning to finalize the arrangements, Catherine continued. You won't be needed for that discussion, obviously. Clear out your things tonight. The new caregiver won't require the level of attachment you've developed. As Catherine turned to leave, Elena's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced down and froze. Stop looking for signs that aren't there. Dad's gone. Accept it. David Hartwell *. Elena looked up sharply, but Catherine was already halfway out the door. Marcus's younger son David wasn't even in the country. He'd been traveling through Europe for the past month, posting Instagram photos from various capitals while his father lay dying. So how did David know about her conversation with Dr. Reeves? How did he know she'd been looking for signs of consciousness? Elena's eyes moved to the security camera mounted discreetly in the corner of the room. She'd always assumed it was for Marcus's protection, monitoring for medical emergencies. But what if it had been watching her instead? Catherine paused at the door, turning back with a smile that never reached her eyes. Oh, and Elena, that folder of photos and videos you've been taking of Dad? We know about that too. Documenting a patient without family consent is illegal. I'd hate to have to press charges, but we will if you cause any trouble about the transition. The door clicked shut, leaving Elena alone with Marcus and the devastating realization that the family hadn't just been planning to end his life. They'd been systematically eliminating anyone who might interfere. Elena looked at Marcus, whose eyes were open and alert, having witnessed his daughter's humiliation and threat. For the first time since she'd started caring for him, she saw tears tracking down his motionless face. 3 squeezes against her palm. Then one more message, so faint she had to lean close to feel it. Trust no one. But as Elena processed this warning, she realized Marcus might be including himself in that statement. After all, he'd known she was his daughter for 3 years and hadn't found a way to tell her until it was almost too late. She was on her own, with less than 12 hours to save a father who'd spent 30 years denying her existence, from a family that would rather kill him than share his fortune with the maid's daughter. The first betrayal wasn't coming from the Hartwell family. It had been there all along, hidden in 3 years of silence from the father who'd watched her grieve for the family she'd never known, while he lay mere feet away, knowing exactly who she was. Elena waited until 2 a.m., when the mansion settled into its deepest silence, before she made the decision that would change everything. She pulled out her phone and began recording. My name is Elena Rodriguez, and I'm documenting what may be the most important evidence of my life, she whispered, angling the camera toward Marcus's face. Mr. Hartwell, if you can hear me, please show the camera that you're conscious. Marcus's eyes opened slowly, focusing directly on the phone's lens. He blinked once, deliberately, then twice. Can you move your hand? The slightest movement of his fingers against the sheets. Mr. Hartwell, do you believe someone intentionally caused your condition? 3 deliberate blinks. Yes. Elena's hands shook as she continued filming. Do you know who? Marcus's eyes moved toward the family photograph, then back to the camera. Your family? 3 blinks. Elena stopped recording and immediately uploaded the video to 3 different cloud storage accounts. Whatever happened next, this evidence would survive. But as she finished the upload, her phone rang. Dr. Reeves' name appeared on the screen at 2:17 a.m. Ms. Rodriguez, I need you to step away from Mr. Hartwell immediately. Elena's blood turned to ice. How did you? The family has security monitoring all activity in that room. They know you've been recording him, and they know about the responses you claim to have documented. Claim? Elena's voice rose. I have proof he's conscious. What you have, Dr. Reeves said carefully, is video of involuntary reflexes that any medical professional would recognize as normal autonomic responses in a vegetative patient. Blinking, minor muscle twitches, eye movement, all perfectly consistent with his diagnosed condition. Elena stared at Marcus, whose eyes were wide open and alert, clearly listening to every word. Dr. Reeves, I'm looking at him right now. He's awake. He's aware. He's been trapped in his body for 3 years while everyone planned his death. A long pause. Then, Elena, I'm going to tell you something that will be very difficult to hear. The Hartwell family has been protecting you from the truth about your employment there. What truth? You weren't hired randomly. Marcus Hartwell specifically requested you as his caregiver because he'd been obsessed with your mother for decades. He hired investigators to track Isabella Rodriguez's family after she died. When he discovered you, he manipulated the hiring process to bring you to his home. Elena's world tilted. That's not true. He had photos of Isabella in his possession when he collapsed. Love letters he'd written but never sent. He'd been planning to seduce you, Elena, just as he'd seduced your mother 30 years ago. The family intervention was meant to protect you from a very sick man's obsession. No. Elena backed away from the bed, but Marcus's eyes followed her, desperate and pleading. No, that's not what happened. The family has evidence, Elena. Financial records showing he'd been supporting you indirectly through scholarships, job placements, even your nursing school tuition. He'd been orchestrating your entire adult life to bring you to him. Elena's legs gave out. Her nursing school had been surprisingly affordable. Her previous jobs had all involved wealthy families who'd recommended her specifically. The scholarship that had paid for her certification. The condition he's in now, Dr. Reeves continued, was caused by a massive guilt-induced psychological break when he realized how far his obsession had gone. When he saw how pure and innocent you were, caring for him without knowing about his manipulation, his mind couldn't handle the contradiction. This is a case of conversion disorder brought on by extreme psychological trauma. But the letter, Elena whispered. He wrote that I was his daughter. Silence. Then, Elena, you need to understand. Marcus Hartwell never had a relationship with your mother. Isabella Rodriguez was a waitress he became fixated on. She died in a car accident shortly after you were born, and he's been living in a fantasy about their connection ever since. There's no biological relationship between you. Elena looked at Marcus, whose eyes were now filled with what looked like shame. The DNA test the family ran on your hair samples confirms it, Dr. Reeves said gently. You're not his daughter. You're the object of a 30-year obsession by a very disturbed man. Elena's phone slipped from her shaking hands. Everything she'd believed about her identity, her purpose, her connection to Marcus, all of it was crumbling. But then Marcus began to move. Not the slight finger twitches she'd been documenting. Real movement. His arm lifted from the bed, his hand reaching toward her with unmistakable intention. Elena, he whispered, his voice barely audible but undeniably present. Don't believe. The bedroom door burst open. Catherine rushed in, followed by David, who was supposed to be in Europe, and two men Elena didn't recognize. Step away from him, Catherine commanded. Elena, you're in shock. You're not thinking clearly. But Elena was thinking more clearly than she had in 3 years. She looked at David, who was very much not in Europe, despite the Instagram photos that had been posted from Paris just hours ago. She looked at Dr. Reeves, who had somehow arrived at the mansion impossibly quickly. She looked at the two strangers, who carried themselves like security personnel. And she looked at Marcus, who was struggling to sit up, his eyes blazing with urgent intelligence. You're all lying, Elena said, backing toward the window. I don't know what this is about, but you're all lying. Elena, David said, his voice gentle and concerned. Dad's been using you. We have recordings of him talking about you when he thought no one was listening. Obsessive, disturbing things. We've been trying to protect you. Marcus managed to push himself upright, his voice growing stronger. Elena, the safe, behind the painting. Sedate him. Catherine snapped at Dr. Reeves. He's having another episode. But as Dr. Reeves approached with a syringe, Elena finally saw the truth hidden in plain sight. The family hadn't been planning Marcus's death because they were greedy. They'd been planning it because he was getting better. They'd been planning it because he'd been conscious for months, maybe longer, and they knew that once he could speak, he would expose something that would destroy them all. Elena grabbed the letter opener from Marcus's nightstand and held it defensively. Nobody moves until he tells me what's really happening. Elena, please, Catherine said. You're having a breakdown. The stress of caring for him, the fantasy about being his daughter, the manipulation, it's too much for anyone to handle. But Marcus was sitting fully upright now, his eyes clear and focused. Elena, he said, his voice gaining strength with each word, your mother didn't die in an accident. They killed her because she was pregnant with my child. Elena stared at him, then at Catherine, whose face had gone white. You're my daughter, Marcus continued, struggling to stand. They poisoned me the day before I planned to change my will, to give you everything. But they didn't know. I'd already changed it, months earlier. David lunged forward, but Marcus caught Elena's hand. The safe, he gasped. Combination is your mother's birthday, February 14th, 1968. As the men moved toward them, Elena made a choice that would irrevocably alter the course of her life. She smashed the window with the letter opener. Help, she screamed into the night. Someone call the police. They're trying to kill Marcus Hartwell. In the distance, lights began turning on in neighboring mansions. Security alarms started blaring. And Elena realized that by exposing the truth, she hadn't just saved Marcus's life. She declared war on one of the most powerful families in the country, and they had resources she couldn't even imagine. The point of no return had just passed them both by. The police sirens that Elena had prayed for arrived within minutes, but her relief died the moment she saw Detective James Morrison step out of the lead car. Morrison had been Marcus's college roommate. His police academy graduation had been funded by a Hartwell Foundation scholarship. His daughter attended the private school, where Catherine sat on the board of directors. "Well, this is quite a scene," Morrison said, surveying the broken window, the medical equipment scattered across the floor where Dr. Reeves had dropped his syringe, and Marcus Hartwell sitting upright in bed for the first time in 3 years. "Ms. Rodriguez, I understand you've been under a great deal of stress." Elena's heart sank as she realized the trap had multiple layers. "Detective Morrison, Mr. Hartwell has been conscious. His family has been planning to kill him." "That's a very serious accusation," Morrison said, his tone suggesting he'd already decided she was delusional. "Dr. Reeves here has explained that Mr. Hartwell is experiencing a temporary episode brought on by medication adjustment. These things happen with long-term care patients." Marcus struggled to speak, but his voice was already growing weaker. "Elena, the safe. You see?" Dr. Reeves interjected smoothly. Disorientation, confusion, repetitive phrases. Classic signs of neurological distress. He needs immediate medical attention. Elena watched in horror as Dr. Reeves approached Marcus with another syringe. "Don't let him inject that. It's what's been keeping him sedated." "Ms. Rodriguez," Morrison said firmly, "you need to step aside and let the medical professionals handle this situation." But as Dr. Reeves prepared the injection, Elena noticed something that made her blood run cold. The syringe contained a different medication than what had been prescribed for Marcus. She could see the label, and it wasn't anything she recognized from his 3 years of treatment. She grabbed her phone and began recording again. "I'm documenting what appears to be an attempt to administer unknown medication to a patient against his will." "Elena," Catherine said, her voice taking on an almost motherly tone, "you're clearly exhausted. You've been working around the clock for 3 years. Anyone would break under that pressure." Morrison nodded sympathetically. "The Hartwell family has arranged for you to receive counseling. Full pay, of course, while you recover from this episode." Elena felt the walls closing in. They were offering her an exit, money, therapy, a clean way out that would discredit anything she might say later. All she had to do was admit she'd imagined everything. "The combination," Marcus whispered urgently. "February 14th. But his voice was fading again, whether from exhaustion or the residual effects of whatever they'd been giving him for 3 years. Elena looked at the safe behind the painting Marcus had indicated, then at the circle of faces watching her every move. Getting to that safe would require getting past Morrison, 2 uniformed officers, Dr. Reeves, and the Hartwell family members. Then her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. *, don't trust anyone in uniform. Morrison's daughter received a full scholarship to Harvard last month. Family money. Get to the safe and live stream everything. A friend *. Elena's hands trembled as she read the message. Someone else knew what was happening. Someone was watching. "Who sent this?" she whispered, showing Marcus the text. His eyes widened with recognition, and he mouthed a single word. "Thomas." Thomas Hartwell, Marcus's younger brother, who'd been estranged from the family for 15 years after some unnamed scandal. Elena had found old photographs of him in Marcus's desk, a man with kind eyes and Marcus's same stubborn jawline. "Ms. Rodriguez," Morrison said, taking a step closer, "I need you to put the phone down and come with us. You're clearly having a psychological emergency." But Elena's nursing instincts were screaming that something was wrong with this entire scenario. Police didn't respond this quickly to domestic disturbances. Medical professionals didn't arrive at private homes in the middle of the night with syringes of unidentified medication. And Detective Morrison was trying very hard not to look directly at Marcus, who was clearly, obviously conscious and aware. "Dr. Reeves," Elena said loudly, "what medication is in that syringe?" "A mild sedative to help him rest." "What's the name of the medication?" A pause. "That's medical information I can't share with unauthorized personnel." Elena turned to Morrison. "Sir, as a police officer, don't you have the right to know what substances are being administered to a potential victim?" Morrison's jaw tightened. Mr. Hartwell is not a victim, Ms. Rodriguez. He's a patient receiving appropriate medical care. But Elena caught the subtle exchange of glances between Morrison and Catherine. They hadn't expected her to ask about the medication. Her phone buzzed again. Asterisk kitchen door. 2 minutes. Trust the man with the scar. T asterisk. Thomas. Somehow, Marcus's estranged brother was orchestrating a rescue. Elena looked at Marcus, who was struggling to stay conscious as whatever was in his system continued to work. The safe combination, she whispered. Is it really Mom's birthday? 3 weak squeezes of her hand. Yes. Elena, Catherine said, her patience clearly wearing thin. This fantasy about being Dad's daughter has to stop. It's unhealthy for everyone involved. Then prove it, Elena said suddenly. If you're so sure I'm not his daughter, let's do a proper DNA test. Right here, right now. Hair samples, witnessed by the police. Silence fell over the room. Even Morrison looked uncertain. We already did a test, David said quickly. You're not family. Then you won't mind doing another one, Elena pressed. Unless you somehow tampered with the first results. Catherine's face flushed red. How dare you? A sound from the kitchen interrupted her. Breaking glass, followed by footsteps. Morrison's hand moved to his weapon. Stay here, he ordered the others, heading toward the door. The moment he left the room, Elena lunged for the painting behind Marcus's bed. Her fingers found the hidden safe, and she quickly entered the combination. February 14th, 68. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside were documents that made Elena's knees buckle. Birth certificates, her real birth certificate, listing Marcus Hartwell as her father. Isabella's death certificate, which listed cause of death as vehicular homicide rather than accident. Police reports that had been buried. Medical records showing that Marcus had been slowly poisoned over several months before his collapse, not suffering from any neurological condition. And photographs. Dozens of them, showing Catherine and David meeting with various individuals, including Dr. Reeves and Detective Morrison, in locations far from the Hartwell estate. Those are fake, Catherine said desperately, but her voice lacked conviction. Elena held up a document that made her gasp. It was Marcus's will, dated 6 months before his collapse. It left everything, the entire Hartwell fortune, to his beloved daughter Elena Rodriguez, child of Isabella Rodriguez, the only woman I ever truly loved. But there was more. A letter addressed to Elena, written in Marcus's handwriting. Asterisk, my dearest daughter. If you're reading this, then they've made their move. Catherine and David have been embezzling from the company for years, using shell corporations to funnel money into offshore accounts. When I discovered their theft and prepared to expose them, they began poisoning me with a drug called succinylcholine. It causes paralysis while leaving the victim fully conscious. Dr. Reeves has been complicit from the beginning. Detective Morrison has been paid to ensure no real investigation ever takes place. They plan to keep me alive just long enough to avoid suspicion, then let me die naturally from my condition. You are my daughter. You are my heir. And you are the only person I trust to ensure justice is served. The evidence of their crimes is in the secondary safe behind the bookshelf. Combination. The date we first met. The day you came to work for me. I love you, Elena. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner. Your father. Marcus asterisk. Elena looked up to find everyone in the room staring at her. Marcus was struggling to sit up again, his eyes blazing with paternal pride and determination. The date I started working here, Elena whispered. May 17th, 21. But as she moved toward the bookshelf, Morrison returned with his weapon drawn. Nobody move, he commanded. Ms. Rodriguez, step away from the safe. Why? Elena demanded. What are you afraid I'll find? Behind Morrison, a figure appeared in the doorway. A man with Marcus's jawline and a distinctive scar running from his left ear to his chin. Thomas Hartwell had arrived. Hello, brother, Thomas said quietly, his eyes fixed on Marcus. Sorry I'm late to the party. But Elena's relief at seeing potential rescue evaporated when she noticed something that chilled her to the bone. Thomas Hartwell was carrying the same type of syringe that Dr. Reeves had been preparing to use on Marcus. The rescue she'd been praying for might be another trap, and Elena realized she was surrounded by people who all claimed to be protecting her while potentially planning her destruction. Marcus's eyes met hers across the room, and his expression carried a message that made her stomach drop. Even Thomas couldn't be trusted. Elena was truly on her own, holding evidence that could destroy the Hartwell family, with nowhere to run and no one to trust. The pressure was building toward an explosion that would shatter everything she thought she knew about her father, her family, and herself. "Thomas," Marcus whispered, his voice carrying a mixture of relief and terror that made Elena's skin crawl. Thomas Hartwell stepped fully into the room, and Elena could see the family resemblance clearly now. The same intelligent eyes, the same aristocratic cheekbones. But where Marcus radiated warmth even in his weakened state, Thomas carried in coldness that seemed to drop the room's temperature. "Hello, Marcus," Thomas said, approaching the bed slowly. "You're looking better than expected." "Thank God you got my message," Elena said, still clutching the documents from the safe. "Your brother has been poisoned. They've been keeping him paralyzed for 3 years while they stole his fortune." Thomas's eyes moved to the papers in her hands, and something shifted in his expression. "May I see those?" Elena hesitated, but Marcus squeezed her hand 3 times. "Trust him." She handed Thomas the documents, watching his face as he read through them. His expression grew darker with each page. "Fascinating," he murmured. "Marcus, you've outdone yourself this time." "What do you mean?" Elena asked. Thomas looked up at her with something that might have been pity. "Elena, I need to tell you something about your father that's going to be very difficult to hear." Catherine and David exchanged glances. Even Dr. Reeves seemed suddenly nervous. "Thomas," Marcus said urgently, "don't." "Marcus didn't fall into this condition because he was poisoned," Thomas continued, ignoring his brother's protest. "He's been faking it. For 3 years he's been lying in this bed, fully conscious and mobile, orchestrating the most elaborate revenge scheme our family has ever seen." Elena's world tilted. "That's impossible. I've been caring for him. I've seen." "You've seen exactly what he wanted you to see," Thomas said gently. "Selective movement, careful timing, all designed to make you believe he was trapped and helpless. But the medical reports, forged. Marcus paid Dr. Reeves handsomely to falsify every examination, every test result, every consultation." Thomas's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "The whole family has been dancing to his tune, believing he was dying while he gathered evidence of their financial crimes." Elena looked at Marcus, whose eyes were now filled with something that might have been guilt. "Is this true?" "Elena," Marcus said softly, "I can explain." "Oh, it gets better," Thomas continued. "Your mother, Isabella Rodriguez, wasn't killed in an accident or murdered by the family. She died because Marcus was driving drunk after a fight with his wife. He hit Isabella's car and left her to die on the side of the road." Elena's legs gave out completely. She collapsed into the chair, the documents scattering across the floor. "That's not true," she whispered. "Marcus hired investigators to find her family afterward," Thomas continued relentlessly. "Not out of love, but out of guilt. When he discovered you, he became obsessed with the idea of redemption. He manipulated your entire life, the scholarships, the job placements, even bringing you here. Also, he could cast himself as your loving father and ease his conscience." Elena stared at Marcus, searching his face for denial, for outrage, for anything that would contradict Thomas's words. Instead, she saw tears. "Elena," Marcus said brokenly, "I wanted to tell you. I tried to find the right time. So you let me believe for 3 years that you were trapped? You let me fall in love with the idea of having a father while you were lying there conscious, watching me grieve for a family that never existed." "You are my daughter," Marcus said desperately. "That part is true. The DNA tests they showed you were fake. You are Isabella's child and you are mine. Born from a woman you killed." Elena's voice rose to a scream. "You murdered my mother and then spent 30 years playing God with my life." Thomas stepped closer, his voice gentle. "Elena, there's more. The will that supposedly leaves you everything? It's real. Marcus has been planning to give you his entire fortune. Not out of love, but because he knows it will destroy Catherine and David. You're not his beloved daughter. You're his weapon of revenge against his legitimate children." Elena felt something inside her chest shatter completely. Every moment of tenderness she'd felt toward Marcus, every tear she'd shed believing in his suffering, every hope she'd harbored about finally having a family, all of it had been orchestrated manipulation. "But here's what Marcus doesn't know," Thomas continued, pulling out his phone. "I've been documenting his recovery for months. I have videos of him walking around this room when he thought no one was watching. I have recordings of his conversations with Dr. Reeves, planning how to maintain the deception." Catherine gasped. "You mean he's been conscious this whole time?" "Completely," Thomas confirmed. "And he's been embezzling money himself, using Elena's identity to move funds into accounts he thought no one could trace. Elena's phone buzzed with a notification. Thomas had just sent her a video file. With shaking hands, she opened it. The video showed Marcus, clearly mobile and alert, pacing around his room while speaking on a phone. The timestamp was from just 2 weeks ago. "Yes, the girl suspects nothing," Marcus was saying. "She's devoted to me completely. When I reveal the inheritance, she'll be so grateful she'll never question how I acquired the evidence against Catherine and David." Elena's heart stopped beating. "The beauty of it," Marcus continued in the recording, "is that Elena will never know her mother died because I was too drunk and selfish to call for help. She'll think Catherine killed Isabella, and she'll spend the rest of her life hating the wrong people." The phone slipped from Elena's nerveless fingers. "Marcus," she whispered, "look at me." He met her eyes, and she saw the truth there: guilt, manipulation, and a kind of desperate love that was more terrifying than hatred. "Did you call for help when you hit my mother's car?" Silence. "Did you try to save her?" Marcus closed his eyes. "I was scared. I was drunk. I thought if I called for help, my career would be over." "So you let her bleed to death on the side of the road." "I went back later. She was already gone. I swear to you, Elena, I went back. After she was dead." Elena's voice cracked. "You went back after it was safe for you." But Thomas wasn't finished destroying her world. "Elena," he said softly, "there's one more thing you need to know about why I'm really here." She looked up at him through her tears, wondering what could possibly be worse than learning her father was her mother's killer. "I'm not here to save you," Thomas said. "I'm here because Marcus promised me half of his fortune if I helped him maintain the deception until you were completely emotionally invested." Elena felt the last piece of her heart turn to ash. "Marcus and I planned this together," Thomas continued. "Every moment of your care, every sign of consciousness you thought you were detecting, every tender moment between you, all of it was choreographed to make you love him completely before he revealed the inheritance." She looked around the room at the faces watching her, Catherine and David, who were learning that their father had been conscious all along, Dr. Reeves and Detective Morrison, who had apparently been playing multiple sides, and Marcus, whose tears looked genuine, but whose love had been a 30-year lie. "The syringe I'm carrying," Thomas said, holding it up, "contains a very different medication than what Dr. Reeves was planning to use. This will actually paralyze Marcus, for real this time. Permanently." Elena stared at him. "What?" "You see, Elena, Marcus made one critical error in his planning. He assumed I would honor our agreement. But I have no intention of sharing anything with the man who killed the only woman our family ever truly loved." Marcus's eyes went wide with terror. "Thomas, no. Isabella Rodriguez was my fiancée before she met Marcus," Thomas said, approaching the bed. "I'd been planning to propose to her the week Marcus seduced her away from me. When she died, I knew he was responsible. I've spent 15 years gathering evidence and waiting for my chance at justice." Elena's world spun. "You're not here to save anyone. You're here for revenge. Against Marcus, yes. But Elena." Thomas turned to her, and for the first time, his expression softened completely. "You're the daughter of the woman I loved more than life itself. I've been watching over you from a distance your entire life. The scholarships, the job placements, those weren't Marcus's doing. They were mine." Elena felt reality shift again. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've loved you as a daughter since the day you were born," Thomas said. "And I'm offering you something Marcus never could: the truth, justice for your mother, and a family that actually deserves you." But as Thomas raised the syringe toward Marcus, Elena realized she faced an impossible choice. She could let Thomas inject Marcus and ensure that the man who killed her mother and manipulated her entire life would spend his remaining years truly paralyzed and helpless. Or she could save the father who had destroyed everything she'd ever believed about love, family, and truth. Either choice would define who she became in the aftermath of this devastation. And either choice would leave her forever changed by the knowledge that everyone she'd trusted had been using her love as a weapon against someone else. Marcus looked at her with desperate eyes, and Elena realized that even now, even knowing everything she knew, a part of her still loved the father who had killed her mother. The midpoint had arrived, and Elena Rodriguez had never been more alone. "Stop," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas paused, the syringe inches from Marcus's arm. "Elena, he deserves this. He killed your mother. And what does that make you if you kill him?" Elena's voice grew stronger, though her hands still shook. "What does it make me if I let you?" It makes us justice, Thomas replied. Something Isabella never got. But Elena was looking at Marcus, whose terror seemed genuine, and at Thomas, whose righteousness felt too practiced, too perfect. 3 years of caring for the sick and dying had taught her to recognize truth in the smallest details. And something about Thomas's story felt rehearsed. Thomas, she said carefully, if you loved my mother so much, why didn't you try to stop Marcus from drinking and driving that night? Thomas's hand hesitated. I wasn't there. I didn't know. But you said you were engaged to her. Wouldn't you have been together? Wouldn't you have known she was going out? Catherine stepped forward suddenly. Elena, there's something you need to know about Thomas. Shut up, Catherine, Thomas snapped, his calm facade cracking. No, Catherine continued, her voice gaining strength. I'm tired of all the lies. Thomas, tell her why you were really estranged from the family. Elena looked between them, feeling the ground shift beneath her feet once again. Tell her about the psychiatric hospital, Catherine pressed. Tell her about the restraining order Isabella filed against you before she died. Thomas's face went white. That's not. Tell her about the night you broke into Isabella's apartment, David added, joining his sister. Tell her about the shrine you built in your basement with her photographs. Elena backed away from Thomas, the syringe in his hand suddenly looking more sinister. What are they talking about? Isabella Rodriguez filed a restraining order against Thomas 3 weeks before she died, Catherine said rapidly. She was terrified of him. He'd been stalking her for months, following her to work, leaving gifts at her apartment, threatening any man who showed interest in her. She loved me, Thomas said desperately. She was just confused by Marcus's manipulation. She was 19 years old and you were 35, David interrupted. She was scared of you, Thomas. Everyone knew it. Elena felt the walls of reality collapsing around her. So none of you are telling me the truth. The truth, Marcus said weakly, is that Thomas has been in and out of psychiatric facilities for 20 years. The truth is that he's been obsessed with Isabella since before you were born, and when she died, he transferred that obsession to you. Thomas laughed bitterly. Rich, coming from the man who's been lying in bed for 3 years orchestrating everyone's destruction. At least I admitted what I did, Marcus shot back. At least I'm trying to make amends. You're still living in a fantasy where Isabella loved you. Elena looked around the room at all of them, Marcus, who'd killed her mother and manipulated her life, Thomas, who was apparently delusional and potentially dangerous, Catherine and David, who'd been embezzling from their father's company, Dr. Reeves and Detective Morrison, who were corrupt. None of you care about me, she said quietly. I'm just a weapon you're all trying to use against each other. Her phone rang suddenly, and she looked down to see a number she recognized. The hospital where she'd worked before coming to the Hartwell estate. Dr. Sarah Chun, her former supervisor and the closest thing to a friend she'd had in years. Elena answered the call, putting it on speaker without thinking. Elena, Dr. Chen's voice filled the room. I got your message about the Hartwell case. I've been doing some research, and I need to tell you something important. Sarah, now isn't a good time. Elena, listen to me. I found medical records from the night Isabella Rodriguez died. She didn't die in a car accident. Silence fell over the room like a blanket. What? Elena whispered. She died in the emergency room at General Hospital from complications during childbirth. Elena, your mother didn't die in any accident. She died giving birth to you. Elena's legs gave out completely. She slumped against the wall, the phone sliding from her hands. But, Dr. Chin continued, her voice echoing from the speaker, here's what's really strange. The birth certificate on file lists the father as unknown, but there's a notation in the medical records about a man who was there during the delivery. Someone who claimed to be the father and who stayed with Isabella until she died. Elena looked up at the faces around her, all of whom looked shocked by this revelation. The man's name was Thomas Hartwell. Thomas dropped the syringe, which shattered on the marble floor. Elena, Dr. Chin continued, I think Thomas Hartwell might actually be your biological father. The room erupted in chaos. Catherine and David began shouting accusations at Thomas. Marcus struggled to sit up, his face filled with confusion and betrayal. Thomas stared at Elena with an expression that might have been hope or terror. But Elena was drowning in the realization that for 3 years, she'd been caring for the wrong man. The father she'd thought she'd found was a manipulative killer. The uncle who'd claimed to love her mother was her actual father, and potentially mentally unstable. No, she whispered, then louder. And oh! Elena pushed past all of them and ran for the door, but Detective Morrison blocked her path. "Ms. Rodriguez, you can't leave. You're a material witness too." Elena shoved him aside with strength born of desperation and ran down the hallway, down the grand staircase, through the mansion she'd called home for 3 years while living a lie. Behind her, she could hear them arguing, shouting, accusing each other of new deceptions. But she couldn't process any more revelations, couldn't handle any more truth. She burst through the front door into the cold night air and found herself face to face with someone she hadn't expected to see. Dr. Sarah Chen was standing beside her car in the circular driveway, her expression grim. "Elena," Dr. Chen said softly, "we need to talk." "Sarah, how did you get here so fast?" "I just talked to you." "Elena, I need you to listen very carefully. I've been investigating the Hartwell family for months. The FBI asked me to maintain contact with you because they suspected you were in danger." Elena's world tilted again. "The FBI? There's been a federal investigation into the Hartwell financial empire for 2 years. Money laundering, tax evasion, medical fraud. But they needed someone on the inside who could document what was really happening to Marcus." Elena stared at her former supervisor, her friend, the woman she'd trusted more than anyone. "You've been using me too." Dr. Chen's face filled with genuine pain. "Elena, I care about you. That's why I'm here. The Bureau doesn't know I'm here. I came because I found out they're planning to raid the house tonight, and I was afraid you'd get caught in the crossfire." Elena laughed, a sound that bordered on hysteria. "So everyone I've ever trusted has been lying to me." "No," Dr. Chen said firmly. "I haven't lied to you. I've been trying to protect you. By using me as a spy? By keeping you alive." Dr. Chen's voice rose. "Elena, the Hartwell family kills people who threaten them. Your mother wasn't the first, and she won't be the last. I've been trying to gather enough evidence to bring them down before they decided you knew too much." Elena looked back at the mansion, where lights were blazing in every window, and she could see figures moving frantically behind the curtains. "How much of what they told me was true?" "I don't know," Dr. Chen admitted. "But I do know that you're in immediate danger. We need to leave now before." The sound of approaching helicopters filled the air. In the distance, Elena could see a convoy of black SUVs racing up the long driveway. "The FBI raid," Dr. Chen said grimly. They moved up the timeline. Elena looked at her former friend, her former supervisor, the woman who'd apparently been manipulating her for months while claiming to protect her. "Sarah," Elena said quietly, "if you really care about me, tell me one thing honestly. Who is my father?" Dr. Chen's face filled with sadness. "Elena, I don't think any of them are." "What do you mean?" "The medical records I found show that Isabella Rodriguez was artificially inseminated. She was a surrogate mother, Elena. You're not biologically related to any of the Hartwell men." Elena felt the last foundation of her identity crumble. "Then who?" "Your biological father was Isabella's employer. A man named Jonathan Hayes, who died in a plane crash when you were 6 months old. Isabella was carrying his child as a surrogate, but when he died, she decided to keep you and raise you as her own." Elena sank to her knees on the cold gravel of the driveway. She wasn't Marcus's daughter. She wasn't Thomas's daughter. She wasn't even Isabella's biological daughter. She was nobody's daughter. The helicopters were getting closer, their searchlights beginning to sweep across the mansion grounds. In minutes, federal agents would storm the house and arrest everyone inside for crimes Elena still didn't fully understand. "Elena," Dr. Chen said urgently, "we have to go. Now." But Elena looked back at the mansion one more time, thinking of Marcus, killer, manipulator, liar, who had at least believed she was his daughter, who had loved her, even if that love was built on lies and guilt. In a few minutes, he would be arrested, prosecuted, probably imprisoned for the rest of his life. And Elena would never know what it felt like to have a real father. The darkness had descended completely, and Elena Rodriguez had never been more alone in the world. She was truly nobody's daughter, and everyone who'd claimed to love her had been using her for their own purposes. The calm before the storm had passed. Now came the destruction. The FBI helicopters landed on the Hartwell estate lawn like mechanical vultures, their rotors whipping Elena's hair around her face as agents in tactical gear poured out of the aircraft. "Elena, we need to move," Dr. Chen shouted over the noise, grabbing her arm. But Elena pulled away, her eyes fixed on the mansion where lights continued blazing behind every window. Inside those walls were the people who had shaped her entire existence through lies, manipulation, and twisted love. "Ms. Rodriguez." A voice called from behind them. Elena turned to see Agent Rebecca Torres approaching, her FBI badge visible even in the chaotic lighting of the helicopters. She was younger than Elena had expected, with kind eyes that reminded her painfully of her mother. Agent Torres, Dr. Chen said formally. I told you I would handle Elena's extraction. Change of plans, Dr. Chen. Torres's voice carried an authority that made Elena's stomach drop. We need to talk to Ms. Rodriguez before we proceed with the arrests. Elena looked between them, feeling the familiar sensation of being the pawn in someone else's game. What kind of extraction? Dr. Chen's face flushed. Elena, I was trying to protect you. By what? Kidnapping me before the FBI could question me. Elena's voice rose above the helicopter noise. Were you planning to disappear me, Sarah? Agent Torres stepped closer. Ms. Rodriguez, Dr. Chen has been feeding us information about your observations of Marcus Hartwell for months. But what she didn't tell us is that she's been paid by Thomas Hartwell to monitor your emotional attachment to Marcus. Elena stared at Dr. Chen, her last remaining trust crumbling like sand. Sarah? Elena, please understand, Dr. Chen said desperately. Thomas promised me funding for my research if I kept track of your psychological state. But I genuinely care about you. You took money to spy on me. Elena's voice cracked. Just like everyone else. Agent Torres moved between them. Ms. Rodriguez, we need your help. Based on the evidence Dr. Chen has provided, we believe Marcus Hartwell has been conscious and mobile for the entire 3 years of his supposed condition. We need you to confirm his cognitive state for our case. Elena laughed bitterly. You want me to testify against him. We want you to tell the truth. Which version of the truth? Elena demanded. The one where he's my father who was poisoned by his children? The one where he's a killer who manipulated my entire life? Or the one where he's a victim of his brother's delusions? Agent Torres frowned. Ms. Rodriguez, what exactly happened in that house tonight? Elena looked back at the mansion, where she could see figures moving frantically behind the windows. In minutes, these federal agents would storm inside and arrest everyone. Marcus, Thomas, Catherine, David, Dr. Reeves, Detective Morrison. The entire web of corruption and lies would be exposed. But Elena realized she faced a choice that would define not just the legal proceedings, but who she would become in the aftermath of this destruction. She could cooperate with the FBI, testify that Marcus had been conscious and aware, and ensure that the man who killed her mother spent the rest of his life in federal prison. Or she could claim that everything she'd witnessed was the result of her own psychological breakdown, protect Marcus from the worst charges, and let him face a different kind of justice, living with the knowledge that the daughter he'd tried to manipulate had chosen mercy over vengeance. Agent Torres, Elena said slowly, before I answer any questions, I need to know something. What happens to Marcus if I confirm he was conscious? He'll be charged with fraud, conspiracy, and likely accessory to murder in your mother's death. He's looking at life in prison. Elena felt something shift inside her chest. For 3 years, she'd loved Marcus as the father she'd never had. Learning the truth about his lies and crimes had shattered that love, but it hadn't erased the memories of sitting beside his bed, holding his hand, believing that her care mattered to someone. And if I say I was wrong, if I say I imagine the signs of consciousness, then he'll likely be transferred to a long-term care facility where he'll spend his remaining years as a legitimate patient. Dr. Chen stepped closer. Elena, you can't protect him. He killed your mother. He killed Isabella Rodriguez, Elena corrected. But she wasn't my mother, was she, Sarah? You made sure I knew that. Agent Torres looked confused. Ms. Rodriguez, I'm not following. None of it matters, Elena said, her voice growing stronger. Marcus isn't my father. Thomas isn't my father. Isabella wasn't my biological mother. I'm nobody's daughter, which means I'm free to choose who I want to be. Elena turned toward the mansion, where she could see Marcus's silhouette in his bedroom window. Even from this distance, she could tell he was standing, mobile, watching the federal agents prepare to destroy his life. I choose to be someone who believes in redemption, Elena said firmly. I choose to be someone who doesn't perpetuate cycles of revenge and hatred. Elena, no, Dr. Chen pleaded. He doesn't deserve your protection. This isn't about what he deserves, Elena replied. This is about who I am. She looked at Agent Torres. Marcus Hartwell has been in a vegetative state for 3 years. Any signs of consciousness I thought I observed were the result of my own wishful thinking and emotional breakdown. I have no evidence of criminal activity, fraud, or conspiracy. Ms. Rodriguez, Agent Torres said carefully, Are you certain about this statement? Once you're on record, we can't protect you if the family retaliates. Elena almost laughed. Agent Torres, the family can't hurt me anymore. They don't own me, they didn't create me, and they can't destroy me. But as Elena made her choice to protect Marcus, she realized there was one more impossible decision she had to make. Thomas Hartwell was still inside the mansion, still carrying syringes of unknown medication, still potentially dangerous to everyone around him. The FBI would arrest him along with the others, but his psychological instability made him unpredictable. If Elena wanted to truly break the cycle of violence and revenge, she would have to go back inside and face the man who might be her biological father, the man who'd been stalking her family for decades, the man who'd spent years orchestrating everyone's destruction from the shadows. Agent Torres, Elena said, I need to go back inside before you make the arrests. Absolutely not. It's not safe. Thomas Hartwell is unstable and armed with medical supplies. If you storm the house, people will get hurt. Elena looked at the mansion where the people who'd shaped her life waited for their world to end. But if I go in first, I can defuse the situation. Dr. Chen grabbed her arm. Elena, you could be killed. Or I could save lives, Elena replied. Including his. Agent Torres studied Elena's face. Why would you risk your life for people who've lied to you? Elena thought about the question seriously. Because someone has to break the cycle. Someone has to choose love over revenge, mercy over justice, hope over hatred. She looked back at the mansion one final time. And I choose to be that someone. Elena Rodriguez walked away from the FBI agents, away from Dr. Chen's protests, away from the safety of federal protection. She walked back toward the house of lies where her fake family waited, knowing that she was about to face Thomas Hartwell, alone, unarmed, and carrying nothing but the strength she'd found in accepting that she was nobody's daughter. Which meant she could be everybody's salvation. The impossible choice had been made. Now came the confrontation that would either redeem them all or destroy them completely. Elena pushed open the front door of the Hartwell mansion and stepped back into the heart of the storm. The moment Elena stepped back into the mansion, she knew something had fundamentally changed. The air itself felt different, charged with the electricity of secrets finally being exposed and lies finally crumbling under their own weight. She found them all in Marcus's bedroom, frozen in a tableau that looked like the final scene of a Greek tragedy. Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, fully upright and clearly mobile. Thomas stood by the window, holding what appeared to be another syringe, his eyes fixed on the FBI helicopters outside. Catherine and David huddled together near the door, while Dr. Reeves and Detective Morrison looked like they were calculating escape routes. Elena, Marcus said, his voice stronger than she'd heard it in 3 years. You came back. I came back to stop this, Elena replied, stepping into the room with more confidence than she felt. Thomas, put down the syringe. Thomas turned to face her, and Elena saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. It wasn't madness or obsession. It was grief so profound it had consumed everything else. You know the truth now, Thomas said quietly. About Marcus, about Isabella, about yourself. I know some truths, Elena corrected. But I don't think I know all of them. Thomas smiled sadly. No, you don't. Elena moved closer, her hands visible and empty. Then tell me. All of it. No more games, no more manipulation. Just the truth. Elena, don't, Marcus warned. He's not stable. Shut up, Marcus, Elena said without taking her eyes off Thomas. You've lied enough for several lifetimes. Thomas studied her face. You're not afraid of me. Should I be? Everyone else is, Thomas replied. They think I'm dangerous, unhinged, obsessed. Elena took another step closer. Are you? Thomas held up the syringe. This contains insulin, Elena. Enough to kill Marcus in minutes if I inject it into his foreline. Catherine gasped. David pressed himself against the wall. Even Dr. Reeves looked terrified. But Elena kept walking toward Thomas. Why haven't you used it already? Because, Thomas said, his voice breaking, I've been waiting for you to understand who you really are. Elena stopped just out of arm's reach. I know who I am. I'm Elena Rodriguez. I'm a nurse. I'm a woman who's been lied to by everyone she's ever trusted. And I'm someone who's choosing to break the cycle of revenge that's been destroying this family for decades. But you don't know why Isabella really died, Thomas whispered. Elena felt her heart stop. Thomas, don't. She didn't die in childbirth, Elena. Thomas's eyes filled with tears. She died because Marcus poisoned her when she threatened to expose his financial crimes. The room went silent except for the sound of helicopters circling outside. That's impossible, Elena said, but her voice lacked conviction. Thomas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder. Isabella called me the night she died. She was terrified, but she was smart enough to record her conversation with Marcus. He pressed play. Isabella's voice filled the room, young and scared but determined. Marcus, I know about the money laundering. I know about the shell companies. I know about the bribes to government officials. Marcus's voice, 30 years younger but unmistakably his. Isabella, you don't understand what you're talking about. I understand that you're using the company as a front for criminal activity. And I understand that you're using my pregnancy to manipulate me into silence. Isabella, be reasonable. You're carrying my child. I'm carrying a child you paid me to carry. Isabella's voice rose. This was supposed to be a simple surrogacy arrangement. You pay me, I have the baby, I give you the child and disappear. But then you started talking about love, about keeping me, about making me part of your family. Elena's legs gave out. She collapsed into the chair beside Marcus's bed, staring at the recorder. I never wanted to be part of your family, Marcus, Isabella continued on the recording. I just needed the money. But I won't let you use this baby as leverage to keep me quiet about your crimes. Isabella, think about what you're saying. If you expose me, you destroy yourself too. You're an accessory to everything. I have immunity. I've been working with the FBI for months, Marcus. They've been using me to gather evidence against you. Silence on the recording. Then Marcus's voice, cold and calculating. I see. So here's what's going to happen, Isabella continued. I'm going to have this baby, and then I'm going to take my daughter and disappear. The FBI will arrest you, and I'll start a new life where no one knows my real name. Your daughter? Marcus's voice carried a dangerous edge. The baby is a girl, Marcus. And she's not really yours. She's mine. I may have been a surrogate, but I'm her mother now. Elena looked up at Marcus, whose face had gone ashen. What happened next? Elena whispered. Thomas stopped the recording. Marcus slipped something into Isabella's water while she was talking. She collapsed 20 minutes later. By the time the ambulance arrived, she was in a coma. She died in the hospital without ever regaining consciousness. But she gave birth to me, Elena said numbly. Emergency cesarean section, Thomas confirmed. Isabella died, but you survived. Elena stared at Marcus, who couldn't meet her eyes. You killed my mother. I was protecting my family, Marcus said quietly. Isabella was going to destroy everything I'd built. She was going to expose your crimes. Elena's voice rose to a scream. She was doing the right thing. She was naive, Marcus replied. She thought she could just walk away from everything, start over. She didn't understand that there are consequences. Elena stood up slowly, her entire body shaking with rage. She was 19 years old, you monster. She was barely older than a child herself. But Thomas wasn't finished. Elena, he said gently, there's more. More? Elena laughed bitterly. What could possibly be worse than learning my father is a murderer? Thomas looked at Marcus with something that might have been pity. Marcus isn't your father. Elena felt reality shift again. What? The surrogacy arrangement wasn't with Marcus, Thomas explained. It was with me. Elena stared at him. What are you saying? I'm saying that Marcus stole you, Elena. You were supposed to be my daughter. I hired Isabella as a surrogate because I wanted a child but couldn't find a woman I trusted to carry my baby. Marcus found out about the arrangement and decided he wanted you for himself. Thomas's voice broke completely. I've been trying to get my daughter back for 30 years. Elena looked around the room at all the faces watching her. Marcus, who'd killed her mother and stolen her from her real father. Catherine and David, who'd been embezzling money while believing Elena was their half-sister. Dr. Reeves and Detective Morrison, who'd been corrupted by family money. And Thomas, who'd spent 3 decades trying to reclaim the daughter he'd never been allowed to know. The DNA tests, Elena whispered. Marcus made sure they were falsified, Thomas confirmed. But I have the real results. Elena, you are my biological daughter. Elena felt something inside her chest break open, not with pain, but with a kind of terrible relief. She wasn't Marcus's daughter. She wasn't the child of a murderer. She was the daughter of a man who'd been grieving her loss for 30 years. But she was also the daughter of a man who'd spent decades planning revenge against the people who'd taken her away. Thomas, she said carefully, what were you planning to do with that insulin? Thomas looked at the syringe in his hand, then at Marcus. I was going to give Marcus the same death he gave Isabella. poison disguised as medical care. And then what? And then I was going to tell you the truth about who you are. I was going to give you the family you've always deserved. Elena studied her biological father's face, seeing Marcus's intelligence, but also a kind of desperate love that felt more authentic than anything she'd experienced in the Hartwell mansion. Thomas, she said quietly, give me the syringe. Thomas's eyes widened. Elena, give it to me. Thomas handed her the insulin-filled syringe, and Elena felt the weight of absolute power in her hands. She could end Marcus's life right now, ensure justice for her mother, and walk away with her real father to start the family she'd always dreamed of. Or she could make a different choice. Elena looked at Marcus, who was watching her with a mixture of terror and resignation. You killed my mother, she said. Yes. You stole me from my father. Yes. You manipulated my entire life to ease your own guilt. Yes. Elena raised the syringe. Give me one reason why I shouldn't kill you right now. Marcus looked at her with eyes full of genuine sorrow. Because Elena, you're better than I am. You're better than any of us. Elena held the syringe steady, feeling the eyes of everyone in the room on her. You're right, she said finally. I am better than you. Elena walked to the window and threw the syringe outside, where it shattered harmlessly on the stones below. I'm better than all of you, she continued, turning back to face the room. And that's why this ends now. Outside, the FBI agents were surrounding the mansion. In minutes, they would storm inside and arrest everyone for their various crimes. But Elena Rodriguez, daughter of Isabella Rodriguez and Thomas Hartwell, survivor of 30 years of lies and manipulation, had found the strength to choose mercy over vengeance. She had found her father. She had learned the truth about her mother. And she had discovered that the most powerful choice of all was the choice to break cycles of hatred and revenge. As the FBI prepared to bring justice to the Hartwell family, Elena walked to Thomas and took his hand. Dad, she said, using the word for the first time in her life with someone who truly deserved it. Thomas began to cry. The explosive revelation was complete, but the real victory was just beginning. Elena Rodriguez had found her family, not through blood or manipulation or guilt, but through the conscious choice to love and forgive and build something new from the ashes of everyone else's mistakes. The triumph was hers, and it was absolute. The FBI agents entered the mansion like a well-orchestrated symphony of justice, but Elena barely noticed the chaos around her. She stood by the window holding Thomas's hand, watching Marcus being read his rights for embezzlement, fraud, and the murder of Isabella Rodriguez. 3 years, 2 months, and 17 days ago, she had been Elena Rodriguez, the invisible maid who believed in a man the world had written off. Tonight, she was Elena Hartwell, daughter of Thomas Hartwell and Isabella Rodriguez, heir to a different kind of legacy entirely. Ms. Rodriguez, I'm sorry, Ms. Hartwell. Agent Torres approached them carefully. We'll need statements from both of you, but given the circumstances, we can arrange for you to stay together during processing. Elena looked at Thomas, her father, whose eyes held 30 years of grief finally beginning to heal. We'd like that. As the agents led Catherine and David out in handcuffs, Catherine turned back one final time. Elena, she called out, her voice stripped of its usual condescension. For what it's worth, you were the best thing that happened to this family. Elena nodded, surprised to find forgiveness even for Catherine and David. They had been children once too, raised by a man whose crimes had poisoned everything he touched. Dr. Reeves and Detective Morrison were escorted out next, their corruption finally exposed. Elena watched them go without satisfaction or anger. Just sadness for how many people Marcus's lies had corrupted over the decades. But it was Marcus's arrest that broke Elena's heart. As 2 federal agents prepared to escort him from the bedroom where she'd cared for him for 3 years, Marcus looked at her one final time. Elena, he said, his voice barely audible, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I destroyed everything I touched. But caring for me, even when you thought I was unconscious, you gave me something I hadn't felt in 30 years. What's that? Elena asked quietly. Love that wasn't corrupted by guilt or fear or greed, Marcus replied. Pure love. The kind Isabella would have given to our daughter if I hadn't destroyed that possibility. Elena felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Marcus, don't, he interrupted gently. Don't forgive me. Some things shouldn't be forgiven. But remember that the love you gave, that was real. That mattered. As the agents led Marcus away, Elena realized that this was her full circle moment. 3 years ago, she had believed in his consciousness when no one else would. Tonight, she had chosen to end his suffering not through vengeance, but through the mercy of letting justice take its natural course. The maid who had once been invisible had become the woman who chose what kind of legacy would continue. Thomas squeezed her hand. "Are you ready to leave this place?" Elena looked around the bedroom one final time. At the chair where she'd sat for 1,095 days, at the safe that had held so many secrets, at the bed where she'd discovered what she thought was her father's consciousness. "Almost," she said. Elena walked to Marcus's bedside table and picked up the family photograph that had sat there for 3 years. But instead of the Hartwell family portrait, she pulled out the picture of her mother that had been hidden beneath it. Isabella Rodriguez at 19, radiant and alive and full of dreams that Marcus had cut short. "I'm taking this," Elena said. "She deserves to be remembered by someone who actually loved her." Thomas nodded, tears in his eyes. "She would be so proud of who you've become." As they prepared to leave the mansion, Elena's phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Sarah Chin. Elena, I know you probably hate me, but I want you to know, everything I told the FBI about your strength, your compassion, your integrity was true. You saved more lives tonight than you'll ever know. I hope someday you can forgive me for the deception. Elena showed the message to Thomas, who read it thoughtfully. "Do you think you'll forgive her?" he asked. Elena considered this. "I think I'm learning that forgiveness isn't about whether people deserve it. It's about who I choose to be." They walked out of the Hartwell mansion together, father and daughter, leaving behind 30 years of lies and manipulation, and choosing to build something new from the truth. But as they reached Thomas's car, Elena paused. "Dad," she said, testing the word again and finding it felt right. "I need to know. Are you okay? Psychologically, I mean. The things Catherine said about hospitals, about obsession." Thomas leaned against his car and sighed. "Elena, I spent 15 years in therapy learning to separate my grief over losing Isabella from my desire to know you. Yes, I had some dark years. Yes, I made some poor choices. But I've been healthy for the past decade, and I've built a life that has room for you, if you want to be part of it." "What kind of life?" Thomas smiled, and Elena saw Marcus's intelligence in his eyes, but also something Marcus had never possessed, peace. "I'm a pediatric doctor in Portland," he said. "I run a clinic for underprivileged children. I never married, never had other children. I've been waiting for you, Elena. But not obsessively, hopefully. I built a life I thought you might be proud to join." Elena felt something settle in her chest, a sense of coming home that she'd never experienced before. "I'd like that," she said. "But I have some conditions." "Name them." "I want to keep working as a nurse. I want to help people the way I helped Marcus, but without the lies and manipulation. The clinic always needs nurses. And I want to create a foundation in my mother's name. Something that helps young women who are being exploited or manipulated." Thomas's eyes filled with pride. Isabella would love that. As they drove away from the Hartwell estate, Elena watched the mansion disappear in the rearview mirror. 30 years of secrets were finally exposed. Justice was being served, and she was beginning a new life with her real father. But the victory was bittersweet. Marcus would spend his remaining years in prison, carrying the weight of crimes that had destroyed multiple generations. Catherine and David would face their own consequences for the embezzlement that had funded their privileged lives. And Elena would always carry the knowledge that her mother died trying to do the right thing, killed by a man who confused possession with love. 6 months later, Elena stood in the Isabella Rodriguez Foundation offices in Portland, reviewing applications from young women seeking help to escape exploitation. Her father worked at the pediatric clinic next door, and twice a week they had lunch together, slowly building the relationship they'd been denied for 3 decades. Elena's phone rang, and she was surprised to see it was a call from the federal prison where Marcus was serving his sentence. "Elena," Marcus's voice was weaker than she remembered, but still unmistakably his. "Marcus, how are you?" "Dying," he said matter-of-factly. "Cancer. They give me maybe 3 months." Elena felt an unexpected surge of grief. "I'm sorry. Don't be. I deserve this." A pause. "Elena, I called because I wanted to tell you something before I die." "What?" "I've spent the last 6 months writing letters to every person my crimes affected. Families of employees who lost their jobs, investors who lost their savings, everyone who suffered because of my choices. I can't undo the damage, but I can at least acknowledge it." Elena sat down slowly. "That's good, Marcus. I saved the most important letter for last, he continued. I wrote to Isabella. I know she's gone, but I needed to tell her I'm sorry. And Elena, I put something in her letter that I think you should have. What? The truth about who she really was. Not the scared 19-year-old I manipulated, but the brave woman who was trying to expose corruption and protect her daughter. She was a hero, Elena. And you're just like her. Elena felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Marcus, don't visit me, he interrupted. Don't come to my funeral. Live your life, Elena. Build something beautiful with Thomas. Break the cycle completely. The line went dead. Elena sat in her office for a long time, crying for the father who had never really been her father, for the man who had killed her mother but who had, in his broken way, loved her too. When Thomas found her there an hour later, she told him about the call. Do you want to see him? Thomas asked gently. Elena considered this. 3 years ago, she would have felt obligated to provide comfort to a dying man. But she had learned the difference between compassion and enabling, between forgiveness and self-destruction. No, she said finally. I want to remember him the way he was in those final moments at the mansion, when he chose to tell the truth and accept the consequences. Thomas nodded, understanding. That evening, Elena received a package containing Marcus's letter to Isabella. Inside, she found something that took her breath away. Hospital records showing that Isabella had survived the cesarean section and lived for 3 more hours after Elena's birth. For 3 hours, Isabella Rodriguez had held her daughter, sung to her, whispered promises about the life they would build together. Elena had been loved by her mother. She had been wanted. She had been cherished for those precious few hours before Marcus's poison finally claimed Isabella's life. Elena called Thomas immediately, reading him the hospital records through her tears. She knew me, Elena whispered. She loved me. Of course she did, Thomas said softly. How could anyone not love you? 1 year later, Elena stood at the podium of the annual Isabella Rodriguez Foundation Gala, looking out at an audience of donors, survivors, and supporters who had gathered to celebrate the lives they'd helped rebuild. My name is Elena Hartwell, she began, and I'm the daughter of Isabella Rodriguez, a woman who died trying to protect her child and expose the truth about corruption and exploitation. In the audience, she could see Thomas beaming with pride, Dr. Sarah Chun, who had become a friend again after months of rebuilding trust, and dozens of young women whose lives had been changed by the Foundation's work. A year ago, I believed I was nobody's daughter, Elena continued. I had spent my life invisible, caring for others while believing I didn't matter to anyone. But I learned something important. We don't become somebody's daughter by accident of birth or manipulation or guilt. We become somebody's daughter by choosing to love and be loved authentically. She looked directly at Thomas. I am my father's daughter not because we share DNA, but because we chose each other. I am my mother's daughter not because she raised me, but because I'm living the life she died trying to give me. Elena's voice grew stronger as she reached her conclusion. The Isabella Rodriguez Foundation exists because we believe that everyone deserves to know their own worth, to escape exploitation, and to build families based on love rather than power. We believe that cycles of abuse and manipulation can be broken by people who choose mercy over revenge, truth over convenient lies, and love over fear. The audience rose to their feet, but Elena was looking at the empty chair she'd reserved in the front row. The chair that would have been Isabella's if Marcus hadn't stolen her life. Mom, Elena whispered, too quietly for the microphone to pick up. I hope I'm making you proud. As the applause died down, Elena felt a peace she'd never experienced before. She had found her father, honored her mother's memory, and built a legacy that would help other young women avoid the exploitation Isabella had faced. The maid who had once been invisible had become a voice for the voiceless. The daughter who had thought she was nobody had become somebody who mattered to hundreds of people. The woman who had been surrounded by lies had chosen to build her life on truth. Elena Rodriguez, now Elena Hartwell, had not just survived her story. She had transformed it into something beautiful. 3 years, 2 months, and 17 days after she'd first noticed Marcus Hartwell blink, Elena had finally found her way home. And home wasn't a place or a family name or a mansion filled with secrets. Home was the choice to love authentically, to break cycles of pain, and to believe that everyone, no matter how invisible they feel, has the power to change the world. What did this story teach you about the power of choosing mercy over revenge, the difference between manipulation and authentic love, and the strength it takes to break generational cycles of pain? Sometimes the people we think we need to save are actually the ones who end up saving us, not through grand gestures, but through the quiet courage to choose who we become in the face of devastating truth. Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world.